So it looks like you guys really enjoyed the MP5 versus the MP5, and today's we're going to do the same thing, but with the M4A1, and we're specifically going to be looking at one attachment that gets heavily debated, and that is the difference between the M16 barrel as well as the Corvus custom. So that's what we're going to cover in today's video. Enjoy the video, learn something new. Please do me a favor, hitting that like button. Goal in today's video is 4,000 likes, so hopefully we can crush that number. And if you are brand new, looking to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Also, a quick reminder, I do have discount codes to Gfuel, Kontrol, Freeks, and Respawn, all linked down in the descriptions. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. So again, here's what we're taking a look at: the Corvus custom versus the stock M16, ADS speed, movement speed, hipfire area, recoil, bullet velocity, and damage range. First up is ADS speed. So here's a side-by-side comparison of their aim down sight speed. And what you can see right here is the Corvus has an aim down sight of 284 milliseconds, and the M16 barrel has an aim down sight of 317. As we approach 284, you can see it pretty much is done on the left-hand side, and on the right, it still has a couple of frames before it goes in there, and that ends up being the difference, about 2 frames there at 60 FPS. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and what it looks like at real time, and you can determine whether or not there's a difference, even though it ends up being 2 frames. So here we go, and you can see at real time, it's very hard to see a difference there. So even though it's not a huge difference, I think it's enough of a difference to give the edge to the Corvus custom, just because it's going to give you that little bit of a feel, even though it didn't necessarily feel it there, like when we were showing it on screen, when they do it side by side. At the end of the day, that will be enough when you're actually aiming down sight to actually line up the shot and hit the target. So it's got to go to the Corvus custom. Now let's go ahead and check out movement speed. So right here we have the different movement speed, and overall you're going to see that it's not a huge difference. The Corvus reaches the wall at 16.95 seconds, whereas the M16 reaches at 17.184 seconds, which is only a difference about 1%. But when movement is the key, so in my opinion, I end up putting them even overall movement, just because a 1% difference, I don't think is really enough of a difference. We even saw for that 70-meter stretch, there was like almost no difference between where they were at. So I think because they're so similar, I think this one's got to be even. Let's go ahead and talk about hipfire area. So for hipfire area, this is basically standing still at the same distance, aiming at the same target, and looking how far the crosshairs are from each other. And since these barrels are very similar, like one's 19 inches and the other one's 20 inches long, so 1 inch difference between the two barrels isn't going to affect it that much. If you removed the barrels completely, the hipfire is just going to get tighter. So overall, this didn't end up being a huge difference. When you look at them at a glance, you'd say that there's no difference. If you overlap them, you would say that there's still almost no difference. And then when we go over here, it ends up being about a 5% difference on area. So that's taking this entire red square and then measuring that against the entire blue square. You end up with a 5% difference. So this one, even though there is a hair of a difference, I think you're going to end up having to put this one as a tie. So there it is. We've gone through those 3. All right, so now we have the recoil patterns. We got the Corvus on the left, and then we have the stock M16 on the right. And initially I thought almost no difference, but what you'll really notice is that little bend that happens where it kind of goes up and then diagonal ends up kind of getting rid of that bend when you put on the M16. So even though the vertical is helping out slightly, and you'll notice more at range, because this is only about 20 meters. Obviously, if you're shooting a target at 70 meters, 5% difference gets multiplied because of how far they are away. And obviously when you start stacking other attachments, since attachments tend to compound, you're going to get a better benefit when combining this with the commando and stuff like that. So you're able to hit your shots just that much easier. So at the end of the day, I think this is enough that gives the edge to the M16. Even though they're fairly close, this really gets rid of that bend that is going to be the part where you're going to have to adjust your aim drastically, versus just gradually. It's going to gradually go diagonal, and you can just hold pretty much the same direction, and it makes it easier for that recoil management. Overall, a good player could be able to use both, and this will be more noticeable, like I said, for those engagements where you're taking somebody on right at that 70-meter drop off where the weapon typically is going to drop off. So now we got one on the stock M16 side, so ADS on that side, recoil, and then tied for movement and hipfire area. Now let's go ahead and take a look at bullet velocity. So what I did for this particular test is I looked at the bullets and looked at the frame that they went from 30 bullets down to 29. lined them up, and then look how many frames it took for it to register a hit marker once it was fired. The difference between those ended up being 83 milliseconds for both. And right here, you can kind of see that testing as I go through. They go ahead and line up, both are firing, and they both get that little hit marker registration, which you can see on the screen right here. Those little white lines that pop up at frame, whatever that is for 83 milliseconds, is exactly where they're lined up. So right there, you can see that it appears on the same frame and they're fired at that same spot. And that ends up being a 70-meter distance. So they come out tied on that one again. When we look at it again, bullet velocity pretty much even. And primarily that's because even though there is a good difference between them in terms of bullet velocity, you're really not going to notice it unless it was extreme distances like 200, 300 meters, which you're really not going to run into with an M4. So now let's go ahead and talk about the last one, which is probably the most important in my opinion, and that is damage range difference. So if we equip the Corvus custom barrel, what we're going to look at here is this first damage drop off is 37 meters. And then if you use the M16, the damage drop off is going to be 41 meters, which is only a difference of about 4 meters. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, what that looks like in game. I fired the shot there. We come in and you can see that it's 37 meters right here, and then it was 41, but the distance between those tags is 4 meters. So that's the distance that we're looking at here in terms of how far they are apart. And then that gets carried over. That's the first damage drop off. So when you use the M16, that distance right there is the distance you get in that first range, which obviously gets a little bit more multiplied when you put on a monolithic suppressor, which also increases the range by about 7-8%. When we do the same thing at its further damage range, the distance between those ranges is 65 meters and 70 meters, which again is a little bit wider because now it's 5 meters instead of 4 meters, but that ends up being the distance here that you were adding on. So what this means in game is that if somebody was within that 37 meters for the Corvus, it's going to take 9 shots to kill. Whereas with the M16, they'll get all the way up to that tag to get a 9 shot to kill. Once it drops off, it drops to a 12 shot to kill. So the distance right here, if you're using the M16 over the Corvus, you're going to kill 3 shots faster than the Corvus, which ends up being pretty significant in my opinion to land 3 additional bullets. When we get to the further range where it was 65 meters and 70 meters, the M16 again had the advantage, and this is a 2-shot difference. It goes from 12 shots to kill to 14 shots. So everything beyond this furthest tag will be 14 regardless of which attachment you're using, but the M16 will have that 2-shot advantage all the way up until where the Corvus drop off was, which was 65 meters. So that, in my opinion, is a huge difference. So when we put that on the board, it ends up putting them pretty much even. I think in Warzone, though, I think it's almost a non-negotiable. I would always run the M16 stock, primarily because your disadvantages aren't so huge that you can't make up for them in another attachment. And on top of that, the damage range, adding an extra couple bullets to your time to kill is like, sounds horrible. Not obviously, it really is within that 5-4 meter range, but 5 or 4 meters is huge in certain scenarios. It's not like the MP5 where it was only half a meter. This is 10 times that difference, which is significant in my opinion. So I think that puts this one ahead, head and shoulders. This would be the check plus in my opinion when it comes to damage range. But some reasons why people would go with the custom Corvus is because it has a little bit better mobility aspects in terms of aim down sight and a slight advantage in the mobility sense if you're combining this with a sniper rifle. So if it's not going to be your long-term option, which is primarily multiplayer, and if you're combining it with a sniper rifle, possibly in Warzone, you could probably go with the Corvus Custom because that distance, you're not really going to get into fights beyond that, because if it goes above 70 meters, you just bust out your sniper rifle. So hopefully that was clear. If there's other comparisons you'd like me to make, whether it's attachment versus attachment or weapon versus weapon, let me know down in the comment section. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video, learn something new. If you did, please do me a favor hitting that like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Also, thank you guys for jumping over on the community Discord. A lot of people have been partying up, and it continues to grow on a daily basis. So if you're looking for other people to party with, even if you don't have a mic, you can still party up with people, and that's a great resource for that. Appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.